Hello and welcome to the Westpac macro video. For the first time working from home video, we'll see how we go with the technology, but happy to be with Andrew Hanlon, a senior economist. Welcome, Andrew.
Hello, Sean.
Now, obviously, a great deal happening in Australia's economy. We did hear from the RBA. I guess this was the first meeting in a little while where they haven't actually delivered any new policy. And we didn't hear anything in terms of their economic forecasts. Fairly vague language there. But in the economics team, of course, Andrew, you can't afford to be vague about that and just wait till May. You need to have a view on the economy now. So at the moment, how are you looking for in terms of Australia's economic outlook?
Yeah, sure. So I understand the reluctance of both the RBA and the federal government to put some point estimates on these forecasts. The uncertainty is just immense. But the numbers, the central case that we're working towards is that the economy contracts for 3 consecutive quarters, both so it's March, June and September. Small falls in March and September and a large contraction in June, maybe in the order of 8.5%. And then assuming some relaxation of these restrictions, businesses reopening, then we see a rebound in the December quarter, maybe in the order of 5% for the economy to contract by 5% for the year. So certainly a deep recession. And in terms of some of the indicators, they're starting to roll in. One which is not an official indicator, which caught my eye, was that in terms of patronage of public transport here in Sydney, it's down by 75%, the lowest level in 100 years. So certainly it is a ghost town here in Sydney. In terms of hard data, we had trade for the month of February. We had travel exports down in the order of 15%. That was that closing of the border with China from February 2, and they're obviously a major source in terms of foreign students and tourism. And then we also had the AIG's update on the services sector for the month of March. It was already a weak starting point from 47 and it fell to 38.7. So no doubt the economy is in recession and it will be a deep one.
Okay, grim stuff. But in terms of the government's response, obviously we haven't seen anything on this scale before. They've had various measures, but it was just last night that Parliament passed the legislation for the JobKeeper payment. So how do you see this in terms of its impact on the economy and your forecasts?
Yeah, so really the centrepiece now, the most important fiscal policy measure is around trying to keep employees engaged with their employers, and that's what the JobKeeper payment is about. What you're trying to do is trying to limit the spike in the unemployment rate to thereby maybe cushion the downturn to some extent, and also you're trying to change the shape of the recovery. So if you can limit the spike in unemployment, then maybe the recovery is a stronger one. So what they've done is they've basically encouraging those eligible employers, so if your sales are down by, I think, in the order of 30%, then they'll pay a wage subsidy, which you then pay to the employee. They can either be engaged with you, but they're stood down, or they can still be working with you if your business is still operating. So we estimate, and this is obviously very, very difficult, we think that in the absence of the scheme, unemployment could spike to 17%, but with the scheme, maybe it spikes to 9%, still quite a sharp deterioration in the labour market, but not a precipitous one that you might have in the absence of the scheme.
Yes, okay. So in terms of the budget outlook, recall that it looks as though the legislation is pretty much as had been indicated early last week where it was first announced. So that 130 billion obviously means there are different factors there in terms of budget impact. So you've got the spending, but you've also got the reduced call on welfare. So where does that leave it in terms of Australia's budget projections?
So, as you mentioned, they're very aggressive measures to deal with what is a once-in-a-century event, and these are very expensive measures. So the metrics they're working with at the moment for the program is at 6 months, it's fortnightly payments of 1,500, and they've suggested that maybe it's up to 6 million employees who might be in the scheme. That gives them $130 billion. When we've looked at our budget numbers, you have both the stimulus cost and also obviously the deterioration in the economy hitting the budget. So at the moment, instead of being basically in balance, which is what they were expecting, you might have a budget deficit in the order of 100 billion in 2019-20, rising to 210 billion next year, which is 10.5% of GDP. So the outlook for net debt has changed dramatically, and that's what's really caught the eye of rating agencies, including S&P. So originally we're at net debt currently at around 18% of GDP. On the forecast they had at MyEFO, that was going to decline to about 16% of GDP in the middle of 21. But now with this change in the outlook for net debt, really the net debt numbers basically double, and you have net debt jumping to 31% of GDP. So certainly still low by international standards, but much higher than we're used to, and certainly much higher than you might expect for a AAA nation.
Yes, obviously that was big news from S&P in terms of changing the outlook for Australia's rating. But I was interested to see, it seemed as though the reaction from the government and even quite a bit of the media seem to be focusing on the retention of the AAA rating, because obviously it is still AAA. It's only a change in the outlook, and that definitely does not guarantee a change in the rating. For details on that, certainly clients, anyone who subscribes to our rate strategy publications, there's an excellent piece from Damien McCullough and Leila O'Connell on that, on the implications and how the ratings agencies come to those conclusions. The Aussie dollar did have a bit of a response to the ratings agency change, the outlook change. So it did dip a little bit there, but overall has actually performed pretty well. The risk appetite has improved somewhat over the week. But I guess, Andrew, in terms of looking forward, we wouldn't be expecting to see anything very positive on the economy. Have we got any major economic data? What are you looking for in terms of our read on just how deep the recession might be, given how long we have to wait for GDP?
Yeah, sure. So I think the two key summary indicators would be private business surveys. So I mentioned we had the AIG's update on the services sector. Next week we get the NAB business survey, which gives you the economy-wide picture. So you'd expect to see a sharp drop there, of course. Also, we'll have coming up next week consumer sentiment from Westpac, the Melbourne Institute. I suspect that will see a very sharp decline. It's already a weak number, but what you get in deep recessions is a plunge in confidence, and that's the real risk. And then other things you'd be looking at, of course, is the jobs update numbers as they roll through in coming months. So those sort of economy-wide measures would be the key focus for us. And obviously, I guess the other issue is it's all about the medical crisis, and so how the path of the virus changes and how we respond to the virus and how that changes, that will really be the key focus in terms of how long and how deep the recession might be.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Andrew, and thanks to our team for trying to get us together from these distances. And we'll see how we go week to week in terms of locations and so on. But appreciate your input, Andrew, and we will speak to you as soon as we can.